Hello, Councilmember Valenzuela. My name is Angelica Campos, Outreach Specialist with the Ring of Democracy.
Hi, my name is Loma Volsi. I am the founder and executive director of the Ring of Democracy. We are here today to talk to Councilmember Katie Valenzuela about her campaign and what she hopes to do for District 4.
Before we get started, we want to preface that the Ring of Democracy is not a political organization, but a nonprofit organization with the goal to engage, educate, organize, and mobilize Black and Brown and other historically marginalized people to build power for themselves and their communities. With that in mind, we wanted to host these sit-downs to further democratize the electoral process by allowing our community members an opportunity to learn more about you in another setting.
Great, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great. So off top, we're gonna give you about a minute or so. Reintroduce yourself to the community and talk about why you're running for re-election and some of the stuff that you've been doing. So, floor is yours.
In 1 minute, right? We'll get it done. Hi, everybody. Katie Valenzuela. I am your city council member since 2020. I actually won my election in March 2020, 3 weeks before the shutdown. So you can imagine what my onboarding process was like. But it's truly been an honor to serve this community. I'm the only tenant on the council right now, so affordable housing has been a huge priority for me. But so has just being responsive to the community. When Roe versus Wade went down, we were the first city in California to pass an ordinance to protect access to healthcare clinics that other cities are now adopting for themselves. We've stood with workers on picket lines and strike lines who are fighting for better pay and fair working conditions, and we've pushed for police accountability and frankly pushed back against things like militarization of our department. So I am just really excited to be considering a fourth term, and I hope to earn everybody's support who's watching this today.
Oh, thank you so much. So we'll jump right in. Do you want to ask the first question?
Yeah. So on the topic, I know on the topic of homelessness, with District 4 currently being overpopulated with homelessness, what new actions do you plan on taking or continue taking on housing these members of the community who are unhoused?
Yeah, I consider this a mix of the immediate thing we need to do and the long-term thing that we haven't been doing. So the near-term thing that we need to do is open more safe camping and parking sites, open more tiny home communities. We did the first and only city-run safe camping sites in the whole city. When I took office, we set the first one up in 10 days, which I would not recommend, but it does show that it's possible if you create a safe place for people. That site was always full. We got hundreds of people off the street through that site, and it provided an immediate relief both for the folks living on the street as well as for the residents and businesses who were impacted by the encampments before we moved them into the safe grounds. And so that's a huge part of the immediate triage, just give people a place to go, right? Long term, the thing that we haven't been doing is the affordable housing piece. So we knew back in 2015 that there was a problem. That was the first year that it was right after Oprah came, all this stuff happened, and they said, whoa, what is happening with homelessness in Sacramento? Something's wrong. Just a couple years later in 2017, our point in time count jumped 30% from the 2015 numbers. So we saw a sharp increase in 2017. In 2019, it went up another 50% on top of that. And then in 2022, it doubled. So we've been on a trajectory for a while that I really trace back to decisions we made to do things like not require developers to build affordable units in their market rate developments. We adopted a tenant protection program that allows up to 10% annual increases, which most people just can't afford. We haven't invested in programs like emergency rent assistance and other programs that we know will keep people housed. So we've been on this trajectory, and that's the work that we need to really do if we're gonna stop the trend of more people becoming unhoused. For every one person we're getting off the street, 3 more folks are losing their housing. And so we need to be able to move upstream and stop the inflow of folks who are losing their housing for very preventable reasons. And we need to build that housing too, because there are thousands of folks on our streets, folks who worked, frankly, folks who are working today who simply can't afford places to go. They have income, they just need that extra help to get into some place they can call home.
Thank you so much for that answer, Councilmember Valenzuela. While we're on the topic of homelessness, we did have a question from a member of a community on our social media ask, what are the barriers to building affordable and low-income housing?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is funding. So when we got rid of that requirement that developers had to build affordable units, we replaced it with this fee. And at that time, and like 6 years ago, that fee was 1/3 of what we knew it would actually cost to build those units. So we've been collecting very small amounts of money, which is not enough for us to keep up with the pace of need to build those units. Really the biggest thing is political will. We do know how to build this housing. We have hundreds of units that are in the pipeline that can't be built because they don't have that funding to get across the finish line. And we know what that would take. We need to do things like a vacancy tax. We've talked about assessing a modest annual fee on owners of vacant lots and vacant buildings and using that to help fund projects like that. In Sacramento alone, we think that could generate $22 million a year, which is more than 10 times what we currently get from those fees we collect from developers, right? Like that's the kind of money we could use to fund these programs long term, to get dozens of projects off the ground, to really unclog the logjam we have right now of projects that just can't get through because they don't have the financial support to get there. But again, that's political will, because there's folks who don't want us to do that. There's also folks who are really opposed to things like mandatory inclusionary units, right? And that's something that we know how to do, that other cities around us frankly do. Even Roseville has an inclusionary housing requirement, right? So I'm like, we know that this is possible. We see developers build projects with these units in it voluntarily. So it's really just choices that we're choosing not to make sure the right housing options are available to everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And since we're still on the topic of housing and homelessness, earlier Angelica mentioned how District 4 is basically like overwhelmed with it, and to some extent. I think we're all impacted by it. If someone says not impacted by homelessness right now, they're just lying, right?
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to someone who say, hey, you know what, we just to remove homelessness, we just want to get arrest them, lock them up, or like what do we say to that? And if the answer is not locking them up, then what do we do with them?
I would say that that's what we're doing now, honestly. Especially with folks who have mental illness concerns or substance abuse disorders. They are cycling in and out of our jail downtown. Our jail downtown is actually our largest mental health services provider in the entire county. And they're trying to get bigger because they're trying to be, the destination for folks who have those disorders. So I do think right now what we're on, and city staff calls it this carousel, right? We move encampments around and around. Sometimes they're in and out of the jail, in and out of the emergency department, 1 block or 2 blocks in any direction. And that's where that waste of resources comes in. In organizer language, we talk about like trash in a river, right? You could spend all this time pulling out trash in a river, or you can send somebody upstream to figure out where the trash is coming from and to address the issue. So when we look at a challenge like homelessness, we're spending so much time reacting and punishing that we're not looking a little bit upstream to say, gosh, if we had more community mental health services, those people might not be ending up being jail. If we had that housing option for them or that safe camping area for them, they might not have ended up in front of that business where they needed to be moved because they were interfering with that business's activities, right? So we are spending a ton of money. I say right now that really is just a matter, again, of choices that we need to make to move upstream. When the county, for example, voted to spend $1 billion expanding that jail to better serve people with mental illness. I imagine what that $1 billion would have done if we had invested it in community resources and housing opportunities for those folks and services for those folks. And I think, man, we would have been a lot safer if we had done that versus continuing to invest resources so far downstream. So I tell people too that, I live in Midtown. I've got 2 encampments within a couple blocks of me right now. And so the impact is super real, not just on us who aren't experiencing homelessness, but on the people themselves. And so we have got to start pushing together, because the solution for all of us is giving people a place to go, getting them the services that they need. And if we can be disciplined enough and tenacious enough to keep pushing our decision makers to do that, we are starting to see the result of that today with more services being open and more housing being open. We just need to keep pushing for those solutions.
Thank you for that. And thank you for thinking about it and working on some of those things. Just to follow up on that, how, because you mentioned the county, what is the relationship between the county and the city, and why isn't more investment being made in homelessness? If you don't mind elaborating on that.
Yeah, I mean, the city and the county have a partnership agreement now, a legally binding agreement saying you do that, we do this, and we all agree to keep going. And it has borne some fruit so far. There's been some new safe state communities that have opened. They're starting to offer services at some of our sites where they weren't present before. And so that work has been productive. It's not moving as fast as I would like because we have a scale issue right now. And if you say we're opening 100 beds, it's hard to, like, I'm excited about that, but I'm also anxious because I know we've got 10,000 people and 100 beds feels like such a small drop in the bucket. And we're not doing enough on housing, which is the prevention measure that I mentioned before. But we are communicating. It's been much overplayed in the press lately that whether or not we're communicating, but we are. And I think they're working on better telling that story to the public. But in the end, public budgets are about priorities. And I think, when we look at how the county money is spent right now, I don't believe the priority has been on expanding those services. I don't believe the priority has been on expanding that housing. The county has a budget that's almost 7 times the size of the city's budget, and they have the same number of people in the unincorporated area, right? And their budget's that big because it's their job to do public health. It's their job to offer these services. It's their job to run the jails and try to intervene before people just exit the jail and reoffend again. That's their legal responsibility. And so I think it's been hard to really, they've flown under the radar, I think, in large part, in my opinion, because they meet during the day on Tuesdays and Wednesdays starting at 9 a.m. And I don't think a lot of folks know what's happening at the county, but now that they're starting to understand their role, what they should be doing, we're seeing more people turn to them and we're seeing them respond. They're responding to the community's pressures. So that's why I talk about pushing together for those solutions, because I wrote a letter, for example, with a bunch of business leaders in my district to the county during their budget discussions to say we desperately need more substance abuse and mental health services in District 4. We are desperate for more of these beds. Please prioritize that. And they did. They didn't go as far as I wanted them to, but they responded to that pressure from the community. So I think it's a balance between building relationships, because obviously we'd rather just do this together and plan this together, and keeping that pressure on from the outside and making sure that they know that there are community members who want them to do more.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, and you're talking about community relationships, like how important that is. So one question I did have is, in terms of community police relations, how do you envision building on the truth and reconciliation process to create lasting positive changes? The funding you secured with the Office of Public Safety and Accountability.
Yeah, that came out when I first came into office. One of the first things I started asking about off agenda, well, 2 things. I asked for the weather criteria to change for emergency shelter because it was really arcane and people were outside and it was cold and wet and I didn't like that. But I was also asking for a review of police protest response, because if you recall back then, December 2020, we had white supremacists and Proud Boys regularly coming to the Capital Region, and you would counter protesters who were regularly showing up, and it looked like on the video that the response to the counter protesters was different than it was for the Proud Boys and other groups. So I was calling publicly to say, we need to look at this. This is disturbing. Maybe it's not accurate, but either way, that demands a question. And that's eventually what led to the mayor coming on board with my ask and us dedicating this funding. Now, that was 3 years ago, and the process hasn't started yet. And so there's still a lot of that money is there. The consultant was identified. We interviewed and talked to them. We know what we need to do. But some of the work that we wanted to do before we started that process includes things like the search and seizure audit that we just did, to really look at the complaints that have been received and really do our own work internally at figuring out what we should be doing to step up to what we already know is a challenge, and then go to the community and say, okay, what else? So I've been frustrated by the delay, but I also appreciate the thoughtfulness that our Office of Public Safety Accountability is taking to really make sure that process can be as meaningful as possible. And I hold a lot of hope that we will listen to each other. And when I say we, I mean the city will really listen to the community's experience and commit to tangible change through investments, through policy, through accountability, including making sure our Police Review Commission actually has a process for their recommendations to be voted on every once in a while, so that we can really hold ourselves accountable to what the community expects from law enforcement.
Thank you for that. So I want to bring us back to some of the conversation that is happening in the community right now, right? We know there was a redistricting happened because of census, right? And then folks had to move lines around, and that happened. And there's what you're running, the seat you're running for right now. There's a huge part of that community who feel like they're not being represented, and or they're saying they're not being represented by you, right? Specifically, what do you have to say to these individuals, and now that you're running to represent them, right? What would you hope that they understand that they'll get from you as a council member?
Yeah, the redistricting process was chaotic is the word that I'll use. It was our first time doing a totally independent process, which I support, but again, it was during COVID, it was over Zoom, and so things were pretty bumpy, and my district ended up changing by 45%. So I have a significantly new section of my district, but the disagreement was that didn't take effect right away. You know, traditionally the city, when the lines changed, those council members or areas changed right away. And this year what happened, after some questions raised by a former colleague of mine, they said, oh no, that doesn't take effect until you run and are elected to serve this new district. So technically East Sacramento, River District, River Park don't have a council member right now. It's the mayor, because he's the one that they have voted for. And from a policy perspective, it makes sense. You didn't vote for me, so I don't really represent you. You know, I wasn't elected to serve East Sacramento yet. We have been responding to folks who reach out to us because they're confused, and I don't blame them one bit, because it takes me 5 sentences to even explain what happened. So someone calls us about a trash issue or an encampment concern, we're still responding to them, but technically we don't represent them yet. That's what this election is about, is choosing whether or not they want us to represent them. And one thing I want people to know that I really pride myself on is being a partner with the community on these things as they arise. It could be a small issue. Like I had someone who was really upset that, you know, the leaves weren't being picked up frequently enough at Southside Park, right? You know, but those are issues for that constituent, and we pride ourselves on calling everybody back, on emailing everybody back, even if we have to say, hey, we're still working on getting an answer to your question, so that they feel like they have a real partner in our office, that we're there to serve them, because that's really our ultimate responsibility. We're here to serve the public. So I've had a lot of folks comment to me since I took office, like, oh my gosh, you got back to me. Like, it was a surprise, because I guess most of my colleagues prior didn't respond to people when they emailed or called. So we really are excited every time and we've gotten really great feedback from the current District 4 about our responsiveness. And so I want them to see me as a partner. And I really do believe, after canvassing and hearing about their priorities, that we actually have a lot in common between the old District 4 and the new District 4. And so I'm really excited to work with them on all of these challenges that we've talked about, because they seem really ready to get to work.
Yeah, and you've been campaigning for what now?
I've lost track. It's been a few months, a while.
You've been campaigning for a few months. How are
Yeah.
the conversations on the doors, or when you're talking to your constituents, and what is the number one need you are hearing from people?
Well, by far, housing and homelessness comes up most frequently. And there's a lot of misrepresentation of my position on homelessness. Like, people think, for example, that I want people to stay on the streets. And I'm like, oh no. Like, I dream of a future where nobody is on our streets, because we have places for them to go, right? So it's been a little bit of dispelling misunderstanding about what our goals are and how we want to achieve them. But more than anything, it's been conversations about what it will take, how we can work together. You know, I recognize that I am one member of a 9-person body. I don't control the county. I can't force my colleagues to vote anyway, so I need that partnership with my community, and we talk a lot about that. But I will say some of the other issues that come up really frequently are actually about police accountability. I had several people early on who, soon after we had voted on acquiring another armored vehicle, who, like, that was their number one question, like, how did you vote on that armored vehicle? And when I said I voted against it, they were like, oh, okay, good. You know, like, And people care a lot about the parks. We have beautiful parks in East Sacramento. They want to know our plans for making that better. But generally, housing and homelessness is by far, we have a lot of medical people in East Sacramento, a lot of doctors, a lot of nurses, and they really understand because they see the impact of this broken system, what prevention looks like and what real solutions would need to look like. So it's been honestly great at the doors. We usually leave with people wanting to vote for us, so I think that means we're doing something right.
That's great. Another question I had is, what initiatives do you have in mind to support education and youth programs?
Oh, well, I know that one of the hot topics is implementing our new children's fund, which was approved by the voters, Measure L, so that we have a dedicated source of funding now, and I know Volma's on that committee as well as others to say what is that BOT, or the business tax from cannabis, is dedicated now towards these youth services. So coming up with a strategic plan, coming up with metrics, but it's really exciting because we are also entering a structural deficit time. We're going to have to potentially talk about reductions, but that money's protected, and it's going to be protected because usually that's the first thing we would cut, were the social services and the stuff for the young people in favor of other city functions. So I'm really excited to see that be implemented because that money's just been kind of collecting in an account right now, and so it's going to be really exciting to see those things roll out because it could cover everything from helping you through your own house to helping partner with schools on after school programs to doing more community events. The sky's the limit when it comes to that, and that's what I hear overwhelmingly from my school district partners, whether it's teachers or admin staff, whether it's school board members. They're really looking for, they know they only have the kids for a few hours a day, and that when those kids leave them, they're going into the community. It's like a pass off from the school district to the city, and right now our options are just too limited. We have great programs like 4th R, which is a program that operates after school on school sites, but it's only at some school sites. It's only for so many kids, right? So we have a very long way to go to ensure our young people have the support they need to turn into healthy, thriving adults, and I think the Children's Fund is going to be a really exciting way to do that.
Yeah, thank you. Did you have any other questions, Jonathan?
No, I think.
No. Okay, I guess that's basically the end of our conversation. I want to take the time again to thank you very much, council member, for taking the time to have this conversation with us. We think this is valuable for our community, and our goal is to always further democratize the electoral process so more people can participate in the process, so more people can hear about your plans for their district, their community. So this is very, very important for us, and I thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come here and give us a minute.
As well, sorry. I was gonna say, if you wanted to take 1 minute to wrap up. Oh, you were gonna get into that, sorry.
Yeah, so if if you'd like, go ahead and take a couple minutes and let the folks know what they get when they vote for Katie Valenzuela.
Yeah, no, thank you for doing this because, getting the information out, ballots drop so soon and voting starts so soon. I really appreciate the time and space. And I think more than anything, I want people to understand that I'm in this with you. I'm a renter. I'm a domestic violence survivor. I'm a nonprofit advocate without a retirement savings account somewhere. I live in these issues. I experience these issues every single day. And I do work way too much probably on my council stuff. I don't really have a personal life, to be honest, but I do it because I really believe in what's possible in Sacramento. I do think that we're capable of addressing these issues. If there's any city in this state or in this country that I think can show what it looks like to do this work well, it's our city. And I want to be a part of that. I want to help my community be a part of that. And I really hope and that I have the honor of earning everybody in District 4's votes so that we can keep working on these really important issues and keep making sure Sacramento is a city for all of us. So thank you again for the time here today, and really excited to have the voting start.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.